Okay, so what about my class then? What should you expect for English 067? What systems might we encounter? Okay, so there's a list of several here. First off, I have very specific requirements in terms of sentence parameters, sentence structures. So one of the first things I do is I teach how to write sentences in my class. I do this at every level that I teach. And once I've taught them, I expect students to understand them and then use them. The second system I use is I actually have created an error correction code, like a list of different short abbreviations that I use to mark different errors that I find within sentences. So if you learn the error correction codes quickly, when I give you your feedback, you should be able to say, oh, okay, that's a comma splice. And we've learned in class how to fix a comma splice. So then you can apply one of the corrections. So the correction codes is its own system. By learning the codes, you should be able to improve your writing. Next, C here, we have APA citations. So we use the APA method for citing and reference lists in my class. So this is just another system. It's an academic system for showing where you borrowed information from. And one of the great things about using APA citations is if you do this correctly, it helps you to avoid plagiarism. Everybody knows the big nasty P word. Plagiarism is when you borrow someone else's ideas without giving proper credit for it. And at VIU, it's a very serious, it's kind of like intellectual threat. So it's a very serious problem. And if you get caught for plagiarism, even if you didn't know you were doing it, even if it was an accidental case of plagiarism, you can still get a 0 on that assignment. So we'll learn how to avoid that in my class. Next, D on our list here is called the triad of support. This is a specific method of writing that builds support properly. And basically what a triad of support is when you're writing a paragraph, you want to support your ideas. So you have an idea sentence that clearly states the idea you're going to talk about. That's the first corner of the triad. Then you have a citation sentence. So this is a borrowed piece of information either for one of our stories, from a poem, or from a supporting document like an article that we've grabbed from the library website. So you have your sentence 1 is your idea sentence, clearly states what you're going to talk about. Idea 2 is your citation sentence. That provides the outside support, proves that you've done your research. And then the third sentence is your analysis. So the third sentence is the third angle of the triangle, if you would, of the triad here. And it essentially creates this really airtight structure where you've introduced your idea, you've provided support from another source, and then you've analyzed the relevance of that support and connected it back into your overall framework or your thesis. So using the triad of support is a very correct method of academic writing that shows you've thought things through, you've grabbed some expertise and properly cited it so that you haven't committed plagiarism, and then you've used your own analysis sentence to link it into the larger structure that you're working within. Talking about larger structures, we also are going to write essays in this class. And learning the format that your instructor wants for the essays, that is a system within itself. So within an essay, you have to think about what each different paragraph is doing. You're going to think about how to structure each paragraph. You're going to look at using linking tools, linking words, to make all of the ideas flow together cohesively. So all of these different parts are the essay format system. Okay, finally on our list here, we have what are called learning checks in my class. That's a fancy name for a test. And so understanding the format that the learning check will be presented in and how you're supposed to complete your work, that's another system. So these are some examples of systems that we'll use in my English classes. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our presentation here. So here are 4 study methods that you can use. These are tools that will specifically set you up to learn the systems of my class. So we've got 4 study methods equals Maximus. Maximus is a Latin word that means the greatest or the best. So using these methods are your best chance to get to a successful outcome. So let's take a look at them then. So number 1, I always encourage students at the beginning of class to seek out peers within the group who you feel a connection with, who you think you can work with effectively. We create what we call study buddies. So you should have a group of 3 or 4 peers. You're always going to be stronger together. Another reason why this is really powerful is because if you have to be absent from one of the classes, you can then contact your study buddies, hopefully through email, and then say, hey, I missed today's class, I was sick, can you share your notes with me? We're stronger together, so let's work together. Number 2, I use what I call study cards or capture cards, and these are just simply those little index cards that you can buy from any dollar store. And what I like to do when I'm learning something new is I'll write the concept on the beginning and then on the front side, and then flip over and have the information on the back. Another really useful idea that I learned from one of my students last semester is you can also frame both sides of your card in the form of a question. So you actually have questions on both sides, and then you would read the question to yourself and try to see if you can recall the answer. You flip it over, the answer is there on the other side, but it's also in the form of a question so that you can actually use the card from either side. It's kind of a cool idea. We'll look at this a little bit more in class. So I actually should give credit to my student from last semester. One of my really eager students in my Foundations for Success class was kind enough to share her adaptation of the study cards or the capture cards with me. So a shout out to my student from last semester. She knows who she is. I'm not going to mention her name for privacy reasons, obviously, but she knows who she is, so she ends up watching this video. She'll know I'm giving props to her. Okay, the next system that we use is called interleaving. Another way to talk about this is spaced review. So this is the concept. In particular, we use a number ratio of 3, 3, 6. What that means is if you learn a new concept on day 1, you should review it on day 3, then you should review it 3 days later, and then you should review it a third time 6 days later. So you learn it, 3 days later review it, 3 days after that review it, 6 days after that review it again. This is spacing out your review process, because what we've seen, what academics see, is that you do need to touch an idea more than once in order to really lock it down in your long-term memory. And 3 is the magic number here. You should be reviewing something at least 3 times. So what I do is I get students to kind of put all 3 of the first methods together. So you have your study buddies, then as you learn your lectures, you create those capture cards, and then you meet up with your study buddies and you kind of quiz each other. So you might say, okay, what are the 4 methods that Matthew promoted in his first video? And you've got your study card in front of you, your buddy's got to try to answer that, and then you can either tell them, yeah, you got it, you nailed it, or oh, you got the first 2, or you missed the last 2. And by doing this active review process with your study buddies, you're going to encourage each other and support each other. And that leads us to number 4. So finally, we have this really cool learning skill called elaboration, or elaborate. And one of my mentors, his name's Bruce Cornwall. He's a really excellent veteran teacher with more than 30 years experience. He's actually recently retired, but I'm carrying on the torch that he's passed to me. This is one of his famous phrases, that teaching is learning twice. So what the elaboration skill is that when you're doing this review with your study buddies, if they don't get the idea, then you would reteach the idea to them. You elaborate to them the content, the idea, the concepts, and by elaborating it, by explaining it to someone else, you're actually having to go through and sort it out yourself, to review it yourself. And this idea of trying to explain it to someone, elaborating on the idea, it's going to help you to remember it later. So you're creating a stronger neurological pathway within your brain. Okay, so that's about good for this particular lecture. So we've got 4 powerful methods that should help you to be able to learn new systems within your class. Best of luck this semester. Let's start strong. Let's work together. Let's capture ideas with our cards. Let's space out our review, and let's teach each other through the skill of elaboration.